Well, I think you also have to look again, though, at the facts and figures of the bulk numbers. Like I was saying, this 10 years ago, Mexicans were shipping more here than we were selling in Mexico. We have reversed that trend by the fact that we do have, and it's documented, that we are selling more to Mexico than we're buying from Mexico. That means that there have been more jobs created in the United States than lost in dealing with Mexico. Well, the trade barriers you talk about, I can be very specific on this one. I make a brake beam for rail cars. There are only 3 people in North America who make brake beams. 2 are in the United States and 1 is in Mexico. Mexico can send their brake beams in the United States. I cannot send mine to Mexico because there's barriers. If the NAFTA goes through, I can go back and compete in Mexico and on their market. So it opens my market by breaking down the barriers. Because in fact, there are more barriers for our business going into Mexico than in vice versa. So if in fact we can reduce the barriers, we're going to open our markets much more than Mexico is going to be open to ours.
Response?
Well, I would take exception that there's more jobs come into this country than what is left. I know there's 700,000 jobs that have been lost to Mexico. And a lot of those jobs don't move to Mexico just because a manufacturer up here can't afford to pay the wages.
But how do you account for the trade surplus? We're manufacturing, these are manufactured goods, primarily manufactured goods, being sold to Mexico more than we're buying. That is produced by American labor. And I think it's a lot like a friend here is saying, is that you can tell when a job leaves, but the 2 jobs that were created to ship into Mexico are much more difficult to find.
Another perspective that you quoted a study, and I'm not going to argue with your study because I may quote one yet too that you could argue with.
I've got it right here, but
we could go back and, you know, the arguments against NAFTA and for NAFTA are very similar to arguments we've had every time there's been a free trade or any kind of a trade agreement. And it was interesting, I was talking with a friend of mine recently, and he was going back to the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act back in 1930, and there's a significance here because at that time there was an effort to save jobs in this country. There was an effort to shore up prices, agricultural prices at that time. They said, well, let's stop the inflow of products from Europe. And the exact opposite happened. Corn went from $1.09 a bushel to 38 cents a bushel because when we shut off buying from other countries, they quit buying from us. And that's what's significant now. When you talk about the loss of jobs to Mexico with NAFTA, what's the labor union's response to the loss of jobs that will occur, the greater loss of jobs that will occur? Because we have turned our back against America's 3rd largest trading partner. We basically said, no, we don't want to open up our borders to you. So they're going to go somewhere for their products, and it may not be here. And if they don't buy here, they're going to buy somewhere else, and that means loss of American jobs here.
Well, Mike, let me make it, excuse me, let me make it clear. What the labor movement is saying about NAFTA is not no NAFTA. What we're saying is not this NAFTA. And the reason we're saying is not this NAFTA is because of the lack of protections and for workers on both sides of the border.
Well, you're right. There are some problems with this NAFTA, but if you look at the overall agreement, the United States is coming out far, far ahead on this one. I mean, Mexico is giving up far more than we are in this agreement, and whenever you negotiate, you have to give a little, you have to take, or you get to take a little, we hope. And I think if you look at the overall agreement, if we would go back and renegotiate now, we may not get as good a deal as what we've got now.
We will pick up on that point and touch on the environmental concerns that, Don, you've been bringing up when we return after a quick break, so stay with us. NAFTA here on News Talk 28 today. Welcome back to News Talk 28. Our focus today, the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. We have perspectives from agriculture, business, and labor. And we're going to turn now to the environmental concerns, which have been at the forefront of much of this discussion. And Don Vanette, in the side agreements for NAFTA, which have been drafted, the side agreements dealing with environment and labor, specifically with the environment, the United States is expected to commit something along the lines of $750 million over 5 years for improvements in the infrastructure. Those improvements are supposed to help the environment, save the waters in particular, the waterways down in Maquiladora area, the northern part of Mexico along the U.S. border. And many are arguing that that money would be better off spent in the United States, perhaps here in the industrial Midwest around the Great Lakes regions, where there is an obstacle to development and to jobs because of pollution problems. Your response?
Along the maquiladoras, again, along the Texas border, the pollution down there is atrocious. And the thing about it, you said $750, and I think that's what the side agreements raised it up from $500 million to $750 million that the United States would be willing to help clean up the border. Now, the Sierra Club estimates that's going to take $20 billion to clean up what has taken place down there by the chemical companies and the manufacturing companies that have polluted the water, polluted the land. So $750 million don't even get close to cleaning up. We have a concern of where that $750 million is coming from. It's coming from the American taxpayer. That's who it's coming from. It doesn't come from those industries that polluted the water and the land and what have you. So we're saying that they're the ones that created the problem. They're the ones that ought to spend the money to clean it up. And it's just so bad down there. I think you'll recall when the congressional delegation went down, and the story of the chicken. I don't know whether any of you have heard that or not. But while they were looking at this stream, a chicken walked up and he took a drink of water out of that stream and shook its feathers and coughed up blood and fell over dead. Now that's the kind of environment we got down there, and American corporations are the ones that are doing that. And the environmental laws in Mexico are much stronger than they are in the United States.
But they're not enforced?
But they're not enforced, and they're not enforced because they have a corrupt government. And how in the world can the United States of America, in that whole document, the word democracy is not mentioned one time.
Well, Bob Jackson, do you see this kind of pollution as an obstacle to jobs and growth here in the Midwest?
Well, I see NAFTA as the opportunity to approach this problem. It's just a year and a half ago, for example, we had a side agreement that was already made as to where the United States and Mexico and the Mexican government was going to get together and start putting. There was a bill that Bush put in for $430 million. Congress decided to not pass that money or appropriate it. So when we had a chance to go down and matching funds out of Mexico to, in fact, take care of some environmental conditions from one factor or another, the money was not made available. Well, now you have a situation again where the Mexican government is going on record. They are putting their money where their mouth is. They are not a developed country. They don't have the assets we have. But they recognize the problem. They know they're going to do something about it, and they wish to have our help. NAFTA gives us a vehicle to develop that help. But we do, as you had said, a lot of the American corporations down there are somewhat responsible for this. We are also responsible to go down and help the Mexicans clean it up. You can't ask somebody to plow the whole field when they don't have a plow. You're going to have to help them get a plow to plow the field. So I think in this case, particularly for environmental, NAFTA is the best avenue to get the scenario started so that we can go down a path that will give us an environmentally better position than we are now. Look at what you're complaining about now, is that they, with impunity, are violating the environment. But we have no ability to really influence it. But with NAFTA, we have a treaty in which we can go in and help them rebuild the environment. So the whole reason of the environmental question is going to be enhanced by a NAFTA agreement.
I don't, of course I don't agree with you, but the companies that created this, you know, right now the taxpayers of the United States are going to pay 85% of the cleanup. Mexico is committed to 15% in terms of dollars for a cleanup. And the companies that created this environmental nightmare down there, they're the ones that did it. Why dump it onto the American taxpayers to pay for that cleanup when they're the ones that did it? You said somewhat responsible. They're totally 100% responsible for what happened down there. The Mexican government, of course, let them do that.
But you're saying the situation developed